Hello everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings, and this is the final book of Anne McCaffrey's talent series, The Tower and the Hive. The first thing I would like to point out is that the cover art is by a different artist, and while it bears some resemblance to the cover art of previous books, it isn't quite the same. The style is different, and also, I'm guessing that that's supposed to be Afra on the right, but frankly, I find that a little perplexing, because honestly, I believe Afra was supposed to be blonde, so why this particular guy has dark hair, I don't know. And he can't be Jeff Raven, because then that would be the Rowan, and the Rowan has all white hair, so I don't quite know what's with this cover. Anyways, I would also point out, of course, that if you compare this to previous covers, oh, no, wait. Here we go. You'll also notice that the font that we've got is somewhat different. So it's kind of a change. Anyways, let's go back to our cover at hand, and discuss this particular book. So this picks up more or less where the last one left off, focuses a great deal on Damia's children once again, and I'm going to note, just because I find it weird, the subplot involving Kincaid Dano, or Dano, however that's supposed to be pronounced, and Luria, just because Anne McCaffrey has very strong sympathies or had since she died some years back now, but very strong sympathies for the gay community. LGBTQ plus, but it's in particular gay men is sort of the specific thing. And in her Pern series, she writes in gay people as not being lead characters, but as being fundamental and expected and totally part of the scenery, and not something to be pointed out as being weird in any way, that they're just functionally part of society, that there are gay couples out there, and whatever. And, she wrote that story that many, many videos back now, she was attempting to sort of explore the conundrum, much worse at the time, of course, of gay couples who wish to have children and who aren't legally allowed to have children because, because of various legal and social reasons that are fundamentally unfair. And she didn't do so great a job at it, but I give her props for trying. In this book, in a way, she's exploring, you could argue that she's exploring the flexibility of human sexuality, the fact that, that whole everything exists on a continuum. But I continue to feel that it is somewhat problematic. I felt at the time, and continue to feel, that it is somewhat problematic that she says Kincaid is gay, makes a very big deal out of everybody shrugging and saying, he'd be perfect for Luria, but damn it, he's gay, so we have to walk away from this because he's just not going to be interested. And then set it up so that Kincaid and Luria wind up having a strange sort of semi-romantic friends with benefits, except he's gay and stuff. It's very, very odd. And the thing is that the Kincaid and Luria relationship, it's solid, it's well crafted. You feel the sincerity between them. There's a great deal of personal interpersonal chemistry and so on and so on and so forth. But it's something that sort of ticks a little bit off with me. But on the other hand, the relationship is very, very solid. Equally interesting, of course, is the relationship between Roger and Asia. She's like a third cousin twice removed. Like, they're technically cousins, but they're cousins, you know, at a great deal of genetic distance. We're not with any bounds of consanguinity on this. And Roger, who is the Rowan's grandson, Damia's second eldest son, Roger has developed an interest in Asia, but it's a very odd dynamic between the two of them. That by the end, she's basically just kind of. It's almost like she's just letting him do it out of a sense of amusement. That Asia, when she and Roger first meet, has very, very little. What's the word I'm looking for? She has very little self-confidence. And Roger basically devotes himself to building up her self-confidence, to pointing out to her various siblings that they have basically run right over her, and that nobody really noticed because she's just one of those people who's kind of naturally a quiet person and doesn't, kick up a huge stink, and so nobody really noticed when they were just running straight over her. And so over the course of the last book and this one, Roger, works on her self-confidence, works on helping her develop her sense of self. And the thing is, by this book, she has now developed that self-confidence, but Roger is continuing to sort of be there for her as though she doesn't have it. And it's a dynamic that I suspect that if Anne McCaffrey had written another book, she would have been forced to deal with it by having Asia actually flip out at Roger and say, okay, seriously, you need to get over this because I'm over it. But she leaves off, and Asia is left more as just being mildly amused at Roger's insistence on being overprotective of her and everything else. Although it is intriguing that their first kiss is overshadowed by, apparently, everybody and their best friend hanging over Roger's shoulder, telepathically speaking, saying, oh my god, finally, you can stop pining. And Roger telling them all to please shut up because I am trying to make out with my girlfriend. It's an intriguing and invasive thing. Once again, by the way, speaking of invasiveness, we hit, once again, the clear indication that Anne McCaffrey seems to have been a very, very big fan of psychology, of psychiatry, of the idea of using science to help people with their own mental and emotional issues. And we get this very, very re-emphasized in this book, this idea of talent having to be very, very given a very, very careful upbringing with a lot of careful telepathically done mental adjustments to assure that everybody is well adjusted and moral and ethical and will follow the various moral and ethical mores that they have to in order to do what they do. At the same time, it's also very, very interesting that we get brought up more than any book since the Pegasus series that Federated Teleport and Telepath that particular group is effectively independent of any governmental agency. That back in the first books in the Pegasus trilogy, there's a lot of discussion about making sure that telepaths, that the talented cannot be co-opted by governments and turned to governmental uses in those ways. And what we get in this book is, once again, a great deal of discussion about the independence of FT&T, which, oddly enough, seems to indicate almost that talents exist with almost like a separate government, or at least the ones who are like part of FT&T, that they have almost a separate government and enforcement structure from the non-talented, sort of ensuring that they're handled correctly given the vagaries and capabilities of talents. It's very, very interesting. It's a weird two-tier system, and yet at the same time it does accept that, you would have difficulties at maintaining the health and welfare of talent without the assistance of talent. It's handled in a much more optimistic way, I would suggest, than, say, what you have in the Marvel Universe, where there's a great deal of, Marvel Civil War and all that other stuff, where you sort of have this question about what do you do when you have these superpowered supervillains that cannot be handled by regular means, but at the same time, if you're going to insist on licensing of deadly weapons, I mean, maybe you should have some sort of license for somebody who can turn themselves into a deadly weapon just by squinting at someone. So this is a very, very similar set of issues, but at the same time, it's handled so very, very differently because Anne McCaffrey appears to ultimately have a very much more optimistic view, I think, about the ultimate capabilities of humanity to self-regulate, to get better. And I find it really, really quite interesting when you consider it. She has that in common with, say, Star Trek, where Gene Roddenberry's vision of the future was of people who had outgrown, petty xenophobia and so on and so forth. I mean, certainly when you read an Anne McCaffrey book, she tends to have these very, very multicultural casts. When you read through her books, there are always names from dozens of different cultures, and almost always the strong implication of what we would call today persons of color, that there's a very, very strong implication of there being a lot of them around and about, because the names suggest a lot of people of Asian descent or African descent or what have you, that she sort of runs the gamut of the globe in terms of the names. And so it's a very, very hopeful book. Also, the fact that in the end, there's very little action in this one by comparison with the others. For all that there is the supposed Hive War Queen, the Hive Queen War, rather, where on one of the planets where they've managed to trap a bunch of Hivers alone on the surface, the queens wind up going to war against each other for territory. There's basically almost no action in this book for the human characters, and makes for a very interesting and peaceful read, actually. So I think that's all that I'm going to be saying, and I guess I will see you all next week.